Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are here with our webinar about making thinking visible and clearing the path for the standards. If you're having, there she is, the next door neighbor here. Um, if you are having any tech issues, if you would chat to Astrid, that would be your best bet. So there's a little kind of upside down triangle there where you can choose a recipient of your chat next to the chat box, and you can choose Astrid if you're having any audio issues or other tech concerns. She's going to be your go-to, and she's ready to help. Okay, I think we are good to go. We're going to go ahead and get started. A reminder that we are recording this session for those folks who are not able to join us. So we're really glad to have this webinar for anyone working with the standards and who wants to really be thinking more about how we can do that more efficiently. And one of the things in conversation with Kristine recently that we landed on was really this idea of making thinking visible. So helping us, go ahead, guiding through this work in the next few minutes here, you'll hear from all of us. So I'm Patsy and I direct Atlas. We're housed here at Hamline University and we do professional development for the state. Also joining us, Astrid, do you want to say hello?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Excited to be here with you today. As Patsy said, I'll be here to help you with any tech issues and helping to monitor the conversation in the chat. Thanks for being here.
And Kristine?
Hi, if you can see me before I sign off on my webcam. I'm Kristine Kelly, and I am the Atlas English Language Arts and Literacy Coordinator. Super excited about this. I know Lindsey is too, because several of the things we're presenting are strategies and routines that we're currently using in our classrooms. So we're really excited about that.
Great, thank you. And also joining us, although I don't know if she has a camera, is Lindsey Cermak, our Numeracy Coordinator Extraordinaire. Lindsey, say hello.
Yes, I'm Lindsey, and as Patsy said, I am the numeracy coordinator with Atlas, and then I also teach GED classes with the Literacy Council. So as Kristine mentioned, some of the things we're going to be talking about today, we have student examples from, and it'll be exciting. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's been fun to be in the room as Kristine and Lindsey have been talking through some of these issues. So thanks for being here. On the next slide, we have the objectives for today's webinar, just so you know what it is that we are planning around. So, and a lovely pumpkin scene in the background there. So one of the things we want to do is be sure that by the end of this webinar, you're able to articulate the benefits of prioritizing making thinking visible in both English language arts and math instruction, and also to make connections to what that means for effective CCRS implementation. So we'll be doing that throughout the webinar, both in our ELA section and in the math section, and in some previous slides as well. And then identifying some very clear strategies, hopefully some things you can take back to your classrooms right away, both for English language arts and math, that help students really show what's going on in their heads. And finally, we want to be sure and identify some further resources for your own learning and networking. So I'm going to let Kristine take this one. Kristine, you're muted on your end.
I am muted. I know some people wish they actually had that button all the time to mute me. So we're going to do just a little bit of brainstorming because we're talking about this really big idea here about thinking and making, helping our students make their thinking visible, their mental moves, and also teachers making their thinking visible. So the question is what is thinking? And let's take a few moments to just think about it. What are we doing when we think? What is it that we're thinking about thinking? So if you would please go ahead and chat in the chat box, anything that you're thinking about, the things that we do when we think, or what it actually means to think, go ahead and chat that out. Give you a few minutes here. Great. I know some of you are still thinking about thinking, but we're getting some great responses here in the chat. Interpreting meaning, making sense of new learning. Bergen states that thinking takes effort, energy, focus. Absolutely. And Tom says, when I think I am processing information. Barb says, processing what we are observing. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Lindsey, asking questions. Absolutely. And knowing when to ask questions. Patsy says, assigning language to abstract ideas. You guys are just really deep. Laura says, explaining thought processes and how they arrived at their answers. So key is getting them to understand how they actually get to the finish line, the mental moves they used. Making connections, categorizing and connecting elements in working memory. That's Matt here. Lynn, using experiences, emotions, information to solve problems of any kind. These are wonderful. Stephanie, making connections to prior learning and experiences. Catherine, all of the behind the scenes, I love that. The behind the scenes processes and sense making that happens in student heads makes me think of the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz. And we need to make sure that our students see the person behind the curtain. Joan, pondering about information you have heard so that you can learn something new or put meaning together. Wonderful. Mental moves. Catherine says that. Mental moves. I'm not sure. I know Patsy's going to talk a little bit about mental moves. This is a big thing. And as you can see, lots of different moving parts. And one of the things that there's a great book that we'll show you at the end called Making Thinking Visible, that the book defines 8 types of thinking. And the first is observing closely and describing what's there. That came up. Number 2, building explanations and interpretations. That also came up. 3, reasoning with evidence. That idea of, especially of, how did you get your answer, and give us the process and a reasonable explanation. 4, making connections. 5, considering different viewpoints and perspectives. 6, capturing the heart and forming conclusions. 7, wondering and asking questions. And 8, uncovering complexity and going below the surface of things. So I think, I don't know, Patsy, Lindsey, Astrid, I think the group did an awesome job touching on a lot of these types of thinking.
Yeah, there's some deep things happening in this group. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of that input. So if you know me, you know I like metaphors. So we're going to start with a metaphor to get us really thinking deeply about thinking deeply here. So when this image is it will make sense in a moment, but one of the things I started thinking about in talking first with Kristine and then also with Lindsey on this very topic is that when we learn something kind of on the surface level, and when we emphasize coverage, which we all do from time to time because there's a lot our students need in a short amount of time, or when we focus on like, just let's get the worksheet done, right? I mean, and we do this sometimes with our students, perhaps in our own learning, perhaps with our children's learning, just let's get it done, like let's just do the thing. When we emphasize that over really getting it, we certainly move forward, we check something off, but it's as if, here's the metaphor, as if we're like skipping through a meadow and just leaving a faint trace in the grass as we go. And then when we return to the topic, whatever it was that we just sort of covered faintly, we may not have any trace that we've already been there, right? There may not be any evidence that we've already covered that thing. So it's surface level and perhaps even temporary. However, when we learn something deeply and really focus on conceptual understanding in math or on understanding concepts and skills deeply in ELA, for example, our learning is like building a highway. It takes longer and more effort to do it, right? But our learning then acts as a superhighway for skills and knowledge that can be applied across contexts and connect things that before were not connected. So perhaps subject areas or other areas of our students' lives can be connected through that learning. We move from finishing the worksheet or correcting the sentence to really a much deeper understanding about math or the language arts concept at hand. So one of the ways to get to this deeper, more long-lasting, more connecting, more transferable learning is to showcase thinking and to really make it visible how our students are grappling with a math problem or how we're understanding a text, for example. And so this webinar is dedicated just to that. How do we build the superhighway? How do we get students, how do we assist them in making their thinking more visible for like a host of good reasons that I'll talk about in the next few slides. So why do we bother? Why bother with making thinking visible? One reason is for better learning, right? So we know that when our students are able to make thinking visible, there's deeper understanding, new skills become transferable to to other contexts, and these are those their ability to articulate their own mental moves. They can tell us what their own problem-solving process is, and then apply those same moves to others areas of their lives. So for one reason, better learning. The next is better teaching. When we know what our students are doing in their heads and what's happening, we are better able to intervene or challenge or move on. So really making thinking visible acts as a means of formative assessment for improving our own instruction. Next, one of the reasons that I'm particularly drawn to with making thinking visible is it helps to build academic language. I mean, if you think about it, if you think about it, making thinking visible is done through communication, either orally or in writing. You cannot see necessarily how someone is listening or see how they're reading. We can see how they're speaking. There's tangible evidence of that, and we can see what happens when they write. So we need those productive skills of writing and speaking in order to see what's going on in their heads. So when we work to make thinking visible, we're working on oral skills, we're working on writing, and they have to articulate their thinking either in spoken or written language, thereby strengthening their academic language in the process. And then finally, another reason to make thinking visible is it helps to build both CCRS, which of course is the focus of this webinar, and TIF skills. And I know Stephanie's on the webinar today as well, and perhaps there's more to be thought of with these TIF skills, but a couple that came to mind for me was that when we're thinking about making thinking visible in both English language arts and math, we're also dabbling in effective communication, critical thinking, and learning strategies, of course, which are three categories of the transitions integration framework. So making thinking visible works towards both of these sets of standards. So I'm going to hand things over to Lindsey because making thinking visible really does start with us as the instructors. Lindsey?
Yeah, so we're going to talk through several strategies today, both for math and ELA. And we just wanted to point out that, and we all know this, but it's very important that we as teachers are modeling for our students how to make their thinking visible. And so we have to make our thinking visible so that they have a starting point. And one example, one small example with math, this is a slide from Sarah Vanderwerf. She did a presentation at Math Institute just about a month ago. And she was, giving this example of a math problem and how, 5.8 times 2.1, or 5 8/10 times 2 1/10, and how the answer at the bottom comes out as 121 8/10. And if students aren't able to see that there's an issue with that, that there's an error in thinking, one way is to have students estimate. Okay, well, does this answer make sense? Let's round, let's estimate these numbers. But instead of doing all of that orally and correcting it orally, she encouraged us as teachers to literally write the word estimate on the board, and to literally write a 6 and point to the 5 8/10, and to write a 2 and point to the 2 1/10, and then to write the 12 down by the answer with a question mark, basically illustrating how am I thinking about this? What am I estimating? Where are these numbers coming from? Is this answer correct? And so just making visible what is going on in our heads so that students have something to go off of when we ask them to show their work. So that's one example in math of where this could take place.
And this is an example. This was actually from a unit that we're working on right now in my reading and writing class. When I talk to my students about analyzing arguments and the essay for the GED, I tell them it's largely a reading task, and that they don't have a lot of time, and when they read, they have to be making mental notes of the claim and pieces of evidence, etc. And so what I do is I take my students through, they have their highlighters, they do everything I do. I know many of you have done think alouds, and I spend a little bit of time, and I have comments there. I really talk them through as I'm going through the argument, thinking this is the claim. Am I sure this is the claim? Oh, let's see if this holds up. Here's evidence. Right away I can make a judgment about this evidence. The person says that monitoring kids online will keep them safe, but the person doesn't actually say safe from what. And you can see as we go along, and the students do everything that I do, and I just talk them through it so that they see the mental work that needs to happen, and the mental work that we're going to be working on for them to be able to start doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to start going through some math strategies. And as we go through these, just keep in mind, okay, as a teacher, what would if I'm going to use this routine in my classroom, if I'm going to use this strategy, what am I going to need to do in order to help my students be able to articulate their thinking? What's my role in this? So some of these strategies you may have seen before, and some of them you may not have thought to do with a certain subject, but we're going to go through 4 math strategies. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them, and then I have I've asked Katie Cheeky from Minneapolis Education to talk through a couple of them as well. So the first one, notice and wonder prompts. We've been hearing a lot about those in the math world, and so this example that I have that I want to talk through is one that I have used in my classroom recently. So this comes from a unit where I first started by introducing the coordinate plane, and I have a multi-level classroom. Attendance is sporadic. There are some core students here, but over the course of the last 3 months or so that I have been working on this long unit, population has changed. So these kinds of prompts of notice and wonder really help me reach a multi-level group of students, because there is a low floor and a high ceiling of what they can notice and wonder, and then there's conversation that happens. So this is what I posed to students. We had been working on coordinate plane. We had talked, if people had been here for a while, we had talked about linear equations. Then I started introducing tables, and I'm starting to introduce unit rates now, and I'm trying to make all of these things, I'm just trying to keep circling around these ideas because they are all related. And so this particular prompt is a table, and I just literally asked students, what do you notice, what do you wonder? And then they had time to individually write on their own papers anything that they noticed, anything that they wondered about, any questions that they had about this. And then we did a large group discussion, and then I recorded it on the board. So these are different things that students brought up and that we talked about as a large group in our classroom. So I'm going to point out a couple things. You don't have to read everything on the screen, but the point is there's a lot of thinking captured on the board, and you can see that. And so my role as the teacher, as I am leading this discussion, is to record what students are saying and to help them make it visible what they're noticing. So there were different fact families that were noticed, different multiplication patterns. There was, we talked about proportions because someone brought up that, oh my gosh, all of these are equaling the same thing if we, found ratios. And then I'm just going to draw your attention up to the very top that says, if you multiply the X by 8, you get the dollar amount. And why this is important is because that's actually not a true statement with this information, because if I multiply the X of 5 times 8, I would get 40, a whole 40, but the Y actually in the table says 40 cents. And so someone is seeing that relationship of multiplying by 8 throughout the table, but it's actually not a whole 8. But I left that up there and no one caught it. I recorded it, but I knew I was coming back to it. So I don't always record incorrect things and not correct them right away, or not have us talk about them right away. But I knew I was going to come back to it because I wanted students to discover that. So then after we had kind of, I was able to gather their thinking, then I wrote this wonder question down on the board and had them talk in groups about this because no one had picked up that was an error. And so if I multiply 5 times $8, I get $40. Is that the same as, and then like 0, I'm just going to, I know we're not supposed to say the points, but 0.40. And I wanted them to really think about this. And actually, I didn't have the $40 right away on the board. I just had 40. and it was harder for them to think about. And as soon as we started talking money, then they knew, oh, $40 versus that's 40 cents. Yeah, I would be getting cheated if someone gave me 40 cents, but they owed me $40. And so just being able to talk about place values and that we weren't actually multiplying by a whole 8, but wanting to lead students there. So I love prompts like this because it allows me to give students an opportunity to enter in where they can enter and where they're comfortable entering into. And then we get to just expand people's thinking by then collecting all of our thoughts. I still think that this kind of prompt would be beneficial if you are working with, in a one-on-one situation, because I think that as a tutor or as a teacher, if that tutor or teacher is thinking through some other things that they want the student to gain from this exercise that maybe they won't say, maybe they will, then they would be prepared to help add to the conversation. So that individual student could still do it individually, and then it could be a conversation between them and a tutor, and potentially, expand their thinking. So I don't think this has to be a classroom setting. Yes, it's great if there's more people, more ideas, but I think it's still doable in a one-on-one setting and still beneficial. One more example of this, the same unit, this is an exact, these 3 representations, A, B, C, these things we had done and completed a table. We graphed this information. We wrote down an equation. We had already done this like a day before or the week before, and it was the exact same information, but I knew that it was going to be review that was necessary, and I also knew that I was going to have other students who weren't here that day that we did these things. So I made it into a notice and wonder prompt. So it was familiar information for some, but I wrote it in a different way, and I wanted them to see that, okay, there's 3 different representations of this information, but really it's the same thing. There are similarities, and so trying to pick up on different things, and maybe if a student isn't able to see all of that, why it's low floor is that students could say, I see numbers, I see that there's a graph, I see that there's a T-chart, I see, like, you could say anything. I see that there's dots on a the 4 line in B, and then there's a bunch of 4s in A. Like, you don't have to say anything what we would consider super high level, but you can still participate and respond. So I love these prompts. It helps make thinking visible, and then you as a teacher can facilitate how to write things down as they share. So that is the first prompt, or the first strategy. And I am just quick looking at the comments before I move on to make sure. And Katie says that it can be done with, these notice and wonder prompts can be done with pictures. You can do it in an ELL writing class. Yes, and just that whole idea of when we relate to money, students understand place values so much more. Oh, good question, Danielle. Are there other terms that can be used instead of notice and wonder? I don't love those words. Something that I do, and if other people want to chime in, that's great, is I define what notice is. Like when I do this with students, especially if I feel like it's a newer group that hasn't done it before, I'll say, what does it mean to notice something? And a lot of people say see. So like, what do I see? And then wonder, like, what questions do I have? So I like that, Katie. What do you still want to know? What do you see? What do you still want to know? Yeah, I agree. I think that those words need some explanation if students aren't used to them. For sure. Good question. So that's one way of helping students just get out what they're thinking. There isn't a specific math problem to solve. It's just, what do you see? What do you want to know? And you can do that with any content. So it's very applicable. You can use it with anything. The second strategy is asking guiding questions. And I recently came across a post on links, on a community in links, and for the Adult Numeracy Network. And there were a couple resources in this post that I read through recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are great suggestions for thinking about how we're asking questions to our students. And so in this presentation that is linked in the materials, I've put the links to both of those articles. They're fairly short. They're like 10 pages or so or less. But this is a quote from the first one on asking effective questions. And so I just want to read this quote. It says, "There's a fine line between a question that encourages the student to think and one that provides the student with too much information or inadvertently solves the problem for the student. Being able to straddle this fine line comes with reflective practice." So I really like this quote because I've been guilty of that. Like, oh man, I gave them too much information. But just being very aware of, okay, soliciting from the student, how did you get that? What made you think that? To guide them in what they're thinking instead of me supplying, or why don't you look at this part again? Do you still agree with that? And just see what happens when they're having to examine their own work and me not telling them. Recently, I will say too, I've had students work in pairs, and I said I should be the last person that you're asking a question to. So you should, you can look in your notes, you can talk with another student, you can ask them, but it's so tempting for them to ask me, am I on the right track? Is this right? And I've realized that I've created that environment, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I need to break this. Part of it is they just want the teacher to tell them that they're right, like regardless. But the other part is I need to do a much better job of not being the one that comes to their rescue. And so they were able to figure a lot out with each other when I was like, I'm actually not going to answer that. So that was kind of fun actually to do. But another from the second resource, which is linked at the bottom. So both of these links are there. There are so many nuggets in there. I just want to reiterate that, but I just pulled out a couple to share with you today. One that stood out to me is this difference. Instead of asking questions this way, are there any questions? Do you have any questions? You don't have questions, do you? I don't think we say that, but you don't have questions, do you? Would anyone like to see that again? These are really easy to just, okay, are there any questions? It's really easy to say that. However, that can really shut down thinking and close people off, and maybe think that they can't, what if I'm the only one that has a question, etc. So instead, we could rephrase and say, okay, what questions do you have? Now, okay, ask me some questions. What questions may I answer? Give me your questions. In all of those examples, it's basically saying, I'm assuming that you have questions. It's good that you have questions. Please let me know what your questions are. So I think it's more inviting in that way. So that can help facilitate students thinking and helping them try to articulate if they are confused, if they aren't understanding. Yeah, I like what Laura just said, gives them permission without pressure to ask questions. Exactly. So I like this shift in wording, and I've been aware of that myself lately. I've been catching myself and saying, okay, what questions do you have? And I think it makes a difference for sure in the expectation and what they feel comfortable with. And then this other slide I have, there's just several different prompts that you can ask to elicit thinking, and this can be for math, but you can also slip in any subject really. But can you think of another way to solve this problem? Helping them expand their thinking and start diving deeper into properties of numbers, into why things work, into different representations of the same information, just helping draw out that thinking and expanding their thoughts on a certain topic and their understanding of a certain topic. Can you use this same method to solve this problem? And then I would add to this, show me how, give me the evidence, show me your thinking on why you're saying yes or no. What would happen if the numbers were changed? And so that's, or what if the problem was like this instead? And so that's similar to what I asked with the $40 question and the 40-cent question is, okay, these numbers with place values, the digits look the same, but the numbers are actually different. Okay, what is actually different in this? And then examining that. You know, if someone said this, how would you respond? I love the idea of having students think of wrong answers to questions, to word problems or to scenarios. If they can come up with a pitfall, or wow, what if they stopped and got a partial answer? You know, that answer is going to be on the test in the ABCD. That partial answer will be there. They're trying to see if you know that you're not done yet. Or if you use the numbers in the wrong way, if you didn't read carefully. And so getting students on the back end of that, being able to anticipate, oh wow, if someone said this, how would you respond? How would you lead them to the right answer? What do you think they did? Where did the error occur? If we notice, or if we know this, then what does that mean for this situation? I do a lot of can we predict the next one with the tables that I'm doing, with the graphs, the linear graphs that I'm doing. Okay, there's a lot of prediction that can happen in those exercises, and so it's fun. And then can you think of another problem that could be solved with this method? Having students write their own problems, applying what they know and seeing, do they understand the general meaning, or the general topic, the general truth, the general mathematical truth that needs to be, or that what we're working on is. So I like these problems, and again, encouraging students when they answer these questions, if we ask them in this way, to show evidence, I think is very, very important. So anyways, those are two, asking guiding questions. How we ask questions can either shut students' thinking down or open it up. And then also the notice and wonder prompts, just opening it up to what they see and going off of that and building a discussion around it. So those are two. I'm actually going to unmute Katie, and she is going to lead us through a couple, two more strategies. So I think, let me just figure out how to do this. I'm sorry, Katie. Oh, you're already unmuted. Yay. Okay. So here we go. Here's Katie.
Hi, everybody. One of the things that I got to see recently with Sarah Vanderwolf when she came to Math Institute was she talked a lot about how using tape diagrams can be used from beginning math. We're talking about being able to figure out fractions all the way up to being able to solve algebraic equations. And that was something that I didn't really know a ton about, and I am continuing to learn about currently. So I'm not an expert in this, but they are another way to allow students to visually think through a problem. And oftentimes they're a better method than the traditional methods that we're taught. And what I mean by that is if you look at the problem that's on the screen, this is a percent problem where you're trying to find the part or whole or a percent. In this case, we're trying to solve the whole. And traditionally it's set up with a proportion, and use cross multiply oftentimes to solve for the missing piece, which is the whole, and we end up getting 60. So we have 15 times 100 is equal to the unknown number times 25, and we get 1500 on one side is equal to 25 times x, and then 25 times x is equal to 1500, and we would divide both sides by 25 to get x by itself, and we get 60. What Sarah presented is to look at that same exact problem, but rather than doing that whole process is to make sense of the problem. So 15 is 25% of what number? And so again, we're still looking for the whole, but you would diagram it with a tape diagram. So you have the whole, which is the large orange box, and then you have it divided into pieces. And the pieces are divided up into 4 different pieces because 25% is the same as 1/4. And so 1/4, we are looking at the orange box that is shaded in, and it says that 15 is 25% of the whole. And so you can figure out if 1/4 or one part of it is 15, then if you put the rest of the parts up, then you can get 15, 15, 15, and 15. And so whether or not then you do 4 times 15 gets you 60, or whether or not you add them up, 15 plus 15 plus 15 plus 15 gets you 60, it's a better visual representation of how you can make sense of what is actually happening.
Mm-hmm. And I love this too, Katie, because of, I mean, students have to then demonstrate that they understand fractions and percents as well. Like 4 equal boxes, and that 25% is a quarter. So I like that. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. So this is similar to the problem before. We are trying to find 3/5 of a number is 25. So it's giving us a part, and now we have to find the whole. And so the tape diagram is divided into 5 equal parts, and 3 of them are sectioned off and are labeled as equaling 25. And so you have to figure out and make sense of, how do I figure out that whole? And so in doing that, well, there's multiple ways to go through and solve this. One of the ways is then I could divide 25 into 3 equal parts, and we end up getting 8 1/3. And I have 8 1/3, then it's each individual box's value. So again, solving it just like the other one where we had 15, I could add up 8 1/3, 8 1/3, and 8 1/3, and 8 and 8 and 8 equals 24. And 1/3 and 1/3 and 1/3 equals 3/3, which is 1. So I have 24 plus 1 gives me that 25. And then I'm left with these 2 other parts over here. And so I have 8 1/3 and 8 1/3. And 8 1/3 and 8 1/3 makes 16 2/3. And I can add that 16 2/3 then to that 25. And I end up getting, oh, I'm sorry guys, lost my notes. 41 2/3. Stephanie, did you have a question? Okay. So now going back and thinking about what Lindsey presented about notice and wonder, why don't we take a few seconds and you guys type into the chat, what do you notice and what do you wonder about this problem and the tape diagrams that represent it? So I don't want you guys to work on solving it currently. I want you to just tell me, what do you notice? What do you see in this problem? And what are you wondering?
Yes, I love these responses. And I agree with you, Danielle, about how these tape problems are great. Forcing students to really think about what's the part, what's the whole, and that I'm not just taking numbers and plugging and chugging. It's like, no, where do they fit and why? So I love that. Oh my gosh, so many different noticing and wonderings. This is great.
I know, I love them. So when we look at these are 2 different representations. The first one, the one in red, is actually an addition problem where you have the quantity of 4 is being added to an unknown quantity of x. And when you add those 2 together, the total is 12. And so the equation below is the equation that would represent that tape diagram. And traditionally then we go through and we'd solve by subtracting 4 from each side, and you'd get x equals 12 minus 4. So you get x equals 8. And that's the red side. Now if we go over to the green side, we have 4 equal parts, and the unknown, I don't know how big each of those parts are because unknown is x. And so I could say I have 4 of those parts. So 4 times x is going to be equal to the total quantity of 12. Another representation of that is if you wanted to add up all the pieces. X plus x plus x plus x equals 12. And again, we'd get that x, the value of x there happens to be 3.
So it's cool to notice, like, after doing this, that they're not the same, even though there's some similarities in it, you know? There's 4s and there's x's and there's 12s, but having students really figure out, well, what is the difference and what is the same on their own is really cool.
And this also helps students see that x visually can be represented as different quantities. Because ultimately when you solve it in the green one, x is equal to 3. And if you look at like the size of that on the green compared to that at the red even, the x is larger on the other side and that value is 8. And so they can also see visually that those quantities aren't equal.
So we just have one more strategy that we'll go through. Yeah, go for it.
So this other strategy is one that I really fell in love with, and I absolutely love it because it's, Lindsey described earlier about having students always want you to check the answer and know if they're doing it right. And one of the ways to kind of get students away from the focus of I have to get to the right answer, I have to get to the right answer, is by supplying the answer. Give the answer to them. So you might present them with the word problem and then tell them the answer is B, and then you'd be able to have them focus on really, well, how did I get to that answer? How do I know that that answer is correct? So they'd have to demonstrate to you really what is happening in their head. What are they thinking? So in this one, it's a painter rented a wallpaper at 9 a.m. and returned it to at 4 p.m. He paid a total of $28.84. What was the rental cost per hour? When you give students the answer of $4.12, then it allows them to just do the thinking behind it. How can I go about and solve that? And same for this one. And these are both from the GED, I believe, practice test, or the preview, the math testing preview. And again, giving them the answer allows them then to focus on the process of how would I go about and solve this? What pieces do I need? How do I put those pieces together? Why is it that it is greater than or less than, and to make sense of the problem. And that allows them to have a conversation if they have somebody to work with, or to have a conversation if you're just doing something with one-on-one.
So maybe we'll just take a couple minutes, and if there's something that you have tried in your classroom, you know, that helps make your students' thinking visible that you want to share, or you know or if there's something that you've seen that you want to try. Oh wow, I really want to try this. If you want to just chat in the chat box, we'll just take a couple minutes for that before moving on to the ELA section. We would love to hear from you. I love that from Elizabeth, that providing a handout with sentence starters for explaining your thinking and asking questions. I've been noticing that in my classroom too, that I need to do that. I think it would greatly help students articulate. So there might be time later, you know, you can keep adding to the chat box. Oh, Tom says he's been using visual patterns. That's awesome. And there's a whole website, visualpatterns.org, I think it is, that you can find different visual patterns if you want to put those up on the board and have students just notice and wonder about them and have some math conversation. Yeah, it can be hard. I hear you, Lynn. Everyone working at their own pace, only having 1 hour a week of math. So yeah, just basically resorting to showing how to do it, not a lot of thinking about the problem. There could be, I found that when using these, it's a hard switch sometimes, because sometimes you have to convince students that it's worthwhile. But even just tweaking like how or playing with the wording of how we're asking the question, or how we're guiding students through showing them and coming up with the answer, going back to like the guiding questions, that can really help students solidify concepts versus methods, even just in how we're helping students one-on-one, for sure. But that is difficult when there's such a time crunch. That is awesome. Just looking at these comments. Thank you so much for sharing. Tom just put another resource in there. Examining students' work, both correct and incorrect work. That's awesome. Never assume things. Purposeful questioning strategies of limited time. Yeah. Yeah, this is good. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really excited about this topic and exploring it in math, and I also teach ELA, so I'm excited to sit back and listen to the ELA section next. But I just think it's so powerful what this shift in or enhancement, if we're already doing it, but just keep enhancing this part of our instruction. So Kristine, I am going to turn it over to you. I think attendees. All right.
I'm here.
Meet presenter. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure.
Awesome. Let me just fire this up. See my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, looks good. Some people may need to resize
Excellent.
it. That happens sometimes, but you're good.
I just want to comment on a comment in the chat box that Teresa Fisher made about becoming the puppet. And that actually becomes a step. When you saw my think aloud on the smart board of the argument, I actually told students that today. I said, we're going to get to the point of where I'm just going to stand here and you're going to tell me exactly what to do. And I might prod them a little bit, like, okay, tell me where the claim is. But that's such an awesome idea. Like, I am going to do what you tell me to do. So I just wanted to point that out. One of the things that's really exciting about this topic is I'm trying a lot of these things in my classroom now that I'm back in the classroom, and I'm seeing some amazing results. I mean, truly amazing results. Just a comment the other day that one of my students at the end of something, after we'd been doing a discussion where students were really digging into what they were thinking, one of my students looked around and she said, "This is a really smart class." And it was just such a great moment. And I'm going to show you things. Lindsey and I have already talked about it. She's already said this could work for math, this could work for math. So I think that as far as the thinking that we do, there's so much crossover here. So I'm going to talk about quickly about 5 strategies, and 4 I'm actively using, and 1 I'm going to use it, and that came out of a lot of the conversations that I've been hearing students have. So see, think, wonder. It's all about the questions. I used to think, now I think, chalk talk and product versus process. So see, think, wonder, very similar to notice and wonder. I have a picture here. When I used to teach social studies for the GED, I would use a lot of pictures. This is a really cool picture done by a Japanese artist about the reflections on the atom bomb. But students make careful observations and they develop ideas and interpretations. You can do it with an object, an image. You can do it anytime during a unit of instruction or in a lesson. And students should provide answers to all three stems at the same time. I work up to this. I start with what do we see, going through and listing some things. What do I think? What do I wonder? I do work them up to I see, based on what I see, I think, based on this, I wonder. This works really well with images that reveal information. If you're doing something, that you want to reveal something about history or a particular time, or have students really examine and tease out a particular perspective that the photographer or the artist or the videographer has. And many of these I have used in my classroom. This first one, I did this actually with a STAR class. We were doing some reading about the Great Migration series by Jacob Lawrence and doing some See, Think, Wonder with that. I love using political cartoons. They're really good for obviously the GED students, but they're good thinking for everyone. You may decide to use a photograph. I did a whole lesson when I was teaching World War II. I had propaganda posters. I printed them out in color and had them laminated, and students had to do some work really observing and interpreting the propaganda posters. This is something that I'm going to use on Tuesday with students. There's so much to observe here, and I'm excited to see this. This has to do with the topic at hand. And this we did use today, since we were doing a News ELA article about Confederate statues and how signs and panels are being placed around them to kind of flesh out the rest of the story. And students were wondering, when these monuments were put up, which was a great wondering, and looking, at the upsurge in monuments and having them do a little See, Think, Wonder here. It was very, very interesting. So what do you see? What do you think about it? What does it make you wonder? This can be really challenging at first because students want to jump right to interpretation and to questions. But the C step, I usually ask students, have you ever had an incident happen at work and you've had to do an incident report or talk to your supervisor about what happened? And what I tease out is that what they have to write or talk about is exactly what they saw, and not a whole lot, not any interpretation or questions or things, but this is what I saw. This was the day, this is who it was, this is what I saw happen, or this is what happened to me. So it is a great workplace skill. It helps them separate their observations and their interpretations, and it really gets them thinking. It's a great kickoff to a unit. Students can come up with all kinds of new connections, and you can do it with an individual. You could do it with a group. Students can do it orally. They can document their thinking. It's really great for multi-level classrooms because it's something that's accessible by students with a range of language abilities. My next is it's all about the questions, and much like the math questions that Lindsey presented, these can also go for math. Math ELA, they're just great questions, and it's been very interesting. My students have been struggling a bit because they're like, I don't know, it's so hard to explain what I'm thinking or why I think this. And I say that's the point of this is it isn't easy, but we're trying to move beyond some simple answers. So we need to ask questions that don't have set answers, and we want to move student understanding forward and help them clarify. I taught them that word clarify last week as an academic word, and now they're like, can you clarify this for me? Can you clarify this for me? I need more clarification. It's pretty fun. To reveal student thinking, and these are appropriate for any content. So here are some examples. I saw this picture and I'm like, I have to use that picture of the exploding head, because there are moments when my students look at me when I say, okay, Tuesday, a student said, I think that I think that this argument, this side isn't very good because there's only one valid point. And I said, which point do you feel is valid? And he struggled a little bit, and I said, well, what do you mean by valid? Give me an example of what another valid point would be. And he was like, you keep asking me these questions. And I'm like, yes, I do. So as you look down here, really encouraging students to look at things in different ways, and what do you think you know, and how do you know it? That's a really big one, because we're talking about how we form a lot of our ideas and opinions and things. How are you viewing this information, the one on the bottom, as we're doing argument? Are you viewing it subjectively or objectively? Stop for a second and think about that. And I also like the what is the story, what is the other story, because we've been doing some of that work with Columbus Day and now working with the Confederate monuments. So these could be used in any number of contexts. Top tips for this are really to explain the purpose of your questioning. So I talk a lot, I talk about it, and I say, look, I'm going to be asking you questions, and it isn't even about me looking for one set answer. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to push you a little bit because I really want to know what you're thinking, because what you're thinking is valuable. And I want to know, and I want you to be able to articulate it, and you have things that I want, that to share, that other students can benefit from and would like to hear. Appropriate wait time is always difficult, and this is connected to the fourth bullet down. Let students finish their thoughts. It's easy to jump in and go, okay, so is this what you're trying to say? And I've done that before. And of course, we're basically just finishing the student's thought, which may or may not be what they want to say, and we're kind of shutting them down. I see Laura said wait time is hard. It is hard. And it's uncomfortable for other students. That's why you have to talk about it and talk about how some students need a little more time. That's the way, our brains work. And otherwise, students, they want to answer for other students because they don't want other students to feel bad. And you have to come to an understanding of why we need to wait for people, because different people reflect in different ways. Students can turn and talk before they share out, and you can give students language to structure responses. Again, those sentence stems. You can focus in on a couple types of questions and then post how they may begin those answers. Okay, this is one, and this is one from the Making Thinking Visible book, and I'm going to start using it as a core routine while we're working with argument, because I keep hearing students say, wow, I used to think this, and now that we've done this reading in class, now I'm not really sure. I think something else, and I'm hearing them say this, and I want them to purposely document it. And so what students do with this strategy is they reflect on their thinking about something and explore how and why that thinking has changed. And this, you could see, would be very applicable to math. You use it when you know students' thinking has likely changed. You can use it after a task, an activity, the end of a unit. It's great, quick, formative assessment. And one of the reasons I think this is so important now, and I'll show you some examples here, the one in the lower right hand or left hand corner with the 4 light bulbs, that's one that I'm going to be using. I created that. You can do this in different formats. The one where the extra step is, I think this is so fascinating, because I just really want students to think about what are the types of things or evidence or experiences that cause them, or stories that cause them to have a change in their thinking. I think that's really important. And this doesn't, how I was going to do today, we didn't get to it, is I just had, I used to think, now I think, I just was going to project it on the smartboard and have them take a half sheet of paper. But students can certainly share as a group, or they can share in pairs. And then we want to push students to to push each other a little bit more and give them some sentence stems to say more about that. I want to hear more about, you know, why your thinking changed, or what do you mean when you say that you used to think, or can you clarify, or can you be more specific? This is why we have to model so much of it, and we have to make our own thinking visible as well for students. Oh, that was wrong. I was going to insert a real classroom example. We didn't get to it today. And I'm sure many of you can sympathize how you have the whole lesson planned and then it just doesn't all happen because students just get really into something or it takes longer. Chalk talk is something that the first time I tried it, my students were so excited. They were unsure at first, but they really, really got into it. And chalk talk is a process where students basically have a silent dialogue with each other. And they're sharing what they think, they're sharing what they wonder, they're sharing that they agree or disagree, or that they feel some connection to what someone says, and they're doing it all silently through writing. These are my actual instructions that I put up. And you can take statements or questions about a topic. We are doing should parents monitor kids online? So I created a series of statements about kids and online activity, and then I wrote each one on a piece of flip chart paper and broke them up into small groups, and they all had to start at one piece of flip chart paper and write comment on the statement that they saw. I gave them 4 or 5 minutes for the first one. Then they start rotating. And then they have things to respond to. So they can write down anything that they're thinking. They can circle other people's ideas that they think are particularly interesting. They can pose a question to the next group, or they can pose a question to someone who's written a comment. They can answer questions. They can extend comments. They can draw lines connecting their comment to a similar one. Well, I didn't know if they would be able to do this without talking. It was pretty amazing the last time we did this. And I have some pictures here. So this is an example of just 2 statements that had to do with the topic. This kids can freely express themselves through social media, and kids should have a place online that is private from parents. The kids should have a place online that is private from parents. That whole sheet is covered because they had a lot to say about kids and privacy and how old you should be. And they really, really got into this. And it was nice because they were able to get up. What I really want to highlight about this are the comments that some students made when I asked them about it. And the first one was a brand new student. We have new students start every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So we have new people, but we have a core. And she's like, I don't know people in this class, but I didn't know everyone had so many different thoughts. It was just really it was really cool to her. She's like, wow, I mean, everybody thinks something different about this. The middle one was really valuable to me because I always have students who don't want to share their opinions out loud. And because they don't want to get into an argument, or they feel like they're going to do an argument, or they don't feel comfortable debating, or for whatever reason. And I had a student come up to me, one of my Muslim students, and she said this: I don't like to share my opinion out loud, but I could share my opinions like this. And that was really, really meaningful to me. And that's what I mean. She's got thinking going on, and it's not visible to anybody unless I provide the opportunity. And they're like, can we look at these again next week? Can we look and see what other people wrote about our comments? And so this is a great activity. Again, you can write some statements. You could do 3 statements. You could do it with a very small group of students. You could write questions. And it's silent dialogue, and because writing is something I'm really working to ramp up. So, and spelling and grammar doesn't count on this because I want them to really get into their thoughts. Product versus process. I talk about this a lot, and there's a lot of focus on the product. What was your answer to the problem? What's the paragraph that you wrote? What did you fill in the blank with? We get a lot of products, but there are really important processes happening here that I want to get at with students. And for me, this is really starting to tap into those TIF skills because I want students to recognize their mental moves. And I know that I really have been thinking a lot about this because recently Lindsey and I were at North Regional. We did a CCRS working group. And she showed an example of a student who wrote the insight that she had, that she is realizing that she always second guesses herself when it comes to math. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is a major insight that this student has about something that is a challenge for her, and realizing, I'm part of the challenge and I have to think about that. And I think that's the importance of having them think through the process. And I love this John Dewey quote: "We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience." And I notice that I do a lot of reflecting in practice, and when I do professional development events, I do a lot of reflecting. And Patsy, as my boss, has our team constantly reflecting, and I'm doing a lot of reflecting, but I'm not having students do all of that reflecting. So it's that idea of the process. Sorry, I went a little bit too fast. This is something, when I was north, was talking to some of the teachers, and one of the teachers from Moorhead said, yes, we are a thinking bunch, Patsy. We are, definitely. One of the teachers from Moorhead said, some of this reflection, we're a one-room schoolhouse, but we could do this. I mean, we have a schedule. We have set breaks, and we could ask students, hey, we're going to break in 5 minutes. Let's do a little bit of reflecting, or set them up on some kind of a routine. And that routine might be turning to another person and saying, this is what I'm working on. This is the progress I feel like I'm making. This is a challenge I had, but some reflection, because this helps students recognize their strengths and also areas that they need to work on. And progress is a huge, huge part of why I feel that a lot of my students, particularly my high intermediate and low adult secondary students, because they can feel like they're in the program forever and not necessarily making progress, and getting them to recognize even the baby step progress that they're making every day. So here are some examples of reflective stems. There's a variety of things here, having them connect to the rationale of why something is important, transferable, what you did, what you're doing, kind of like the example I gave about making a simple observation in the workplace and filling out an incident report or something. What could you do with this skill, out in the larger world, looking at the challenges, where they may need more clarification, a strategy that they use today or that day, how the learning relates to create that coherence, relates to previous learning. Also, when they work in groups, is thinking about, how did I do in my group or in my pair? What did we do well? What could we have done better? These are really powerful questions. And you just have to pick, you even have to pick a couple. You might say, you know what, I think that I want them to do with the learning I did today, I will be able to, and a strategy I used today. And that becomes part of your routine. It's super powerful because it helps them see their effort and progress. And it can help them set small term goals if that becomes part of the reflection. This is what I did today. Next time in class or between classes or whatever, I want to do this. They learn a lot more about their individual strengths and areas of growth. I think back again to that example with Lindsey's student, realizing that you second guess yourself all the time. It's kind of a huge insight because she's probably second guessing herself in a lot of areas of life. Sharing strategies that can help other students when students hear other students' mental moves. I just want to look at here what Joan said, and it disappeared because I saw writing sentences reflecting on what is learned helps our English language learners to start thinking and processing information in English. Awesome. My fingers keep slipping. It helps them develop thinking skills that are transferable to life, education, and career. And of course, it helps us adjust and individualize instruction, again, when we know what's going on in their heads. So, obviously, there's a lot coming out in the chat box today. There were so many great comments in math, and I'm seeing some great comments. I don't know, I haven't been monitoring the chat necessarily as I've been talking. If someone who has been, Patsy or Lindsey, if you want to call out a few of the comments that were made in the chat box as I was talking.
Sure.
But I'd also like you to take a little bit of time to chat out some ways that you're doing some of these things, or other ways that you're making student thinking visible. And I think a great question is, if somebody came into your classroom, somebody to observe, or somebody, a new student came, or your boss or somebody, how would they know what students are thinking? What's going on? So are there any comments, Patsy or Lindsey, that you saw that you'd like to call out?
Sure, there was some great comments in response to the discussion around wait time and how both Lindsey and Tom commented on how helpful that is, and how it can be really helpful to devalue speed in the classroom and make sure everyone kind of has a moment to digest, particularly language learners. Lindsey said it, when we immediately answer, we rob people of their own thinking. So really giving people space to do that. I think that's one characteristic of thinking that perhaps didn't get mentioned earlier, is that it takes time, right? It's not instantaneous. So letting the room be quiet, letting people just have a moment, saying, I'm not going to take any immediate responses, letting people talk to a neighbor, Tom mentioned, instead of to the whole group, can really help give people a chance to articulate their thinking before they have an audience, or a large audience at least. So that was one thing. And then you mentioned Joan's comment around writing sentences. Stephanie also mentioned helps folks realize how all of the work they do in class will help them reach their future goals, even when the work isn't directly from a GED book, for example. So I think that's a really powerful thing to have in our practice as well.
Yes. Any others that you'd like to chat out?
I'm sure there were more other additions or anything I missed, perhaps, Lindsey. If you saw anything that you wanted to bring up, let me know.
No, those are the things. Yeah. We just got to.
I see Teresa. Oh, sorry. I see Teresa Fisher posted. I learned this from Bergen, who's also here with us. Small thing in my open lab that I tell subs or volunteers. I think that's really important that that we communicate some of this too. Whether it's a couple question stems we want them to make sure they're using. Float as people are floating, to stop at a student working independently and ask, explain to me what you're learning in this lesson and what is the main concept here.
And I think that helps with all sorts of teaching environments. I'm thinking of parenting in particular with my teenagers and thinking, tell me how you got to this decision, right? Sometimes that can be just tell me how you got here, because sometimes the pathway is not clearly visible to us as the person trying to do the instructing in all sorts of contexts, but makes sense once we hear from them. So giving them the opportunity to explain their thinking can help all sorts of ways.
Well, it's part of that idea of creating a culture of thinking. Choose a handful of strategies. You don't want to use too many things, but a handful that, so for example, as we move through more pro-con arguments, more argument topics, Chalk Talk is definitely going to be part of that when we kick off a new topic. And the See, Think, Wonder, I had a student come back from taking the official practice test for social studies, and she got a 137 which I had to tell her she is not a native English speaker. And I told her that if I had to take the GED in her language, I would get like a score of 2. So how amazing her 137 is, she called out the political cartoons. And this is a great opportunity to do the See, Think, Wonder and make that part of the routine. I see Joan here. I like to use scrambled words for learners to organize into sentences. It is enlightening to watch learners try to work through the meanings and order of the words to create sentences with meanings. Danielle, absolutely all classes, reading, ELL, math, listening and speaking are easy to incorporate. It gets the voices in the room, meaning it gets students engaged right away. And I think the key there is these are not overly difficult strategies, but we have to be intentional about them, and we have to. They're not an add-on. They're not something extra I have to do beyond the learning that I want them to do, as much as they're a companion, and they're going to help the learning deepen, and they're going to help them make more connections and maybe see a lot more rationale in why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. Lynn said, I didn't finish my thought, getting away from one answer. And students can be uncomfortable with that. So you have to be prepared to talk about the value of wrestling with answers, that it's more the thinking process and not so much the answer. Bergen, what is the most important sentence in this text, or the most difficult? Oh, I love that. Lindsay wants to try Chalk Talk. Lynn says she's going to try Chalk Talk and See, Think, Wonder. It's great. Thank you for all your responses. Adam, draw a picture of what you read and label key pieces with direct text. Love it. Anything else anyone would like to share? We're pretty much on time here, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and maybe as people are finalizing their final thing they may want to share, or something they're thinking about, we can move on to the next piece here.
Sure. And this is also my slide. So, I'm sorry, this has just been a really fun webinar. The math stuff was just super cool and super applicable. And I do see another comment here. Bergen, I'd like to try making a semantic map with students, examples of a concept and non-examples and the categories that go with it. Yeah, this is big thinking. I know several years ago, I actually did a metacognitive session here in Minnesota and at COABE, and that's what it was called, big thinking. And I'm glad that it's kind of coming back around, and I'm remembering a lot of this great work. We're going to talk a little bit about some upcoming things here. We do have the CCRS Implementation Networking and Resource Group on Schoology, and we really want to get this active. I am the lead, and I think that a lot of what we've talked about today, it would be really great, as I'm seeing comments, I want to try this, I want to try this. It would be so great to just post a comment about how it worked, or any other questions, or any other routines for making thinking visible you think other people could really benefit from hearing. There is an access code here, and you need the access code to join. And we always say this, but we're going to keep saying it. There's a place for your notification settings, and you want to make sure that you are receiving updates and comments from the group. Okay, let's stop here for a second because Stephanie had a comment. And, oh, great ideas from Laura. We are recording this webinar, so talking to a writing teacher from my program about helping students to organize and group their ideas in paragraphs, making that visible. Students circling all of the ideas that go together as a visual clue. Yeah, these are great. Thank you for your comments. We have lots. I don't know if this was my slide, but I guess I'm going to quickly take it. Ways to keep learning and connecting. We have lots of groups, and again, we have a goal. Each of these groups has a solid person who's monitoring. And, there's a lot of great conversation. I know that the One Room Schoolhouse group, I know the numeracy instruction networking group has been getting more and more active, and it's fun to see those postings come through. And we, of course, have the CCRS Foundations online course. We'd really love to see you get involved and just have these forums for teachers to share.
Yeah, I'll chime in here, Kristine. So Lindsey Cermak is, of course, on the webinar and took the math section on this webinar, and she coordinates the numeracy networking group. And then Maren Frank is our star, an English language arts person, and she handles our reading practitioners group. That's our newest one that just took off this late summer. So if you have questions related to reading, that would be a great place to share them, or resources, or a great book, or something on your mind. Our One Room Schoolhouse Schoology group is facilitated by Elizabeth Bennett, who's also on the webinar. And then we also have an ACES networking group with Stephanie Summers, who's also on the webinar today. So, and of course, if you're working with Adult Diploma, they have a group as well. So no matter what you find yourself identifying with, there is a group for you and a place where you can connect with other Minnesota ABE practitioners around specific topics.
Yes, it's really quite fun, and we have several of our facilitators here on the group, so that makes it even better if people want to talk in their individual groups about this topic. We have 2 more CCRS implementation support webinars coming up, and January 30th into 2020. I can't even believe it's going to be November 1st tomorrow. And also March 18th. We gather ideas in lots of ways for these webinars, and we'd sure like to know if you have anything off the top of your head right now. You can certainly share in the chat box something that my keyboard is very sensitive today, anything that you really would like us to tackle in the support webinars, any topics for CCRS, implementation, instruction, just anything. We always want to be responsive. So if anything's in your head, if you'll just chat that in the box, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. Stephanie Summers, who is again on the webinar today, and I are going to be running a content standards integration cohort starting in January. We had an informational webinar on Monday. That informational webinar was posted in all of the Schoology groups, or the link to that recording, where we give a lot of information about what it's going to be like and a taste of what we're going to do, where we show just a kind of a regular, or like an average lesson plan, and how you can turn it into, just knock it out of the ballpark lesson plan loaded with TIF, CCRS, and North Star Digital Literacy. And so information is available on the Atlas website. We have an application process, and Patsy just posted a link in the chat box. The applications are due November 22nd, and this is going to be really this is going to be a group that's going to really dig in and get a little dirty as far as really doing the work and doing it with your current students and getting a lot of coaching. So not a ton of us saying this is how you do it, although we are going to provide you with lots of examples, guiding questions, and again tease this out, but really coaching, really helping you to see the connections in your lessons and really be able to enhance and focus on one of those standards areas that you feel that you need some growth in. So for example, for me, it would be North Star Digital Literacy. That's a big focus of mine. So check that out. We'd love to see you in the cohort. Patsy?
Sure. So anyone who has any contact with reading, writing, or language, which is probably everybody on the webinar, you are invited to join us for, I believe it's our 5th annual Language and Literacy Institute happening in late January here in the metro area. So if you work with reading, writing, or ESL, if you're interested in integrating literacy into your math or other content area, we are interested in having you at this institute. It's 2 full days. We have 3-hour sessions and 90-minute sessions. You can also get the CCRS English Language Arts Foundations work done. If you are in the STAR cohort, you're coming anyway, but you might as well come for both days. We are very excited. This agenda is coming together nicely. It's going to open as far as registration in mid-December, and so look for that, and about 6 weeks prior to the event. And we will hope to see you all there. This is the largest event that Atlas puts on, and you really don't want to miss out. This is a good one.
And our evaluations, the evaluations, not ours, but evaluations of the presenters, the sessions, are always just great. So I know that people get a great deal out of it. Any further reading? This is a book. This was published, I believe this was 2014, and there's some great, this goes through a lot of these strategies and a lot of other strategies in great depth, and includes some description of how it actually is playing out in a classroom, or how it played out in a classroom with a teacher and with students. There's a lot of great information online if you look at Making Thinking Visible. In the materials section, under your chat box or around your chat box, we have uploaded a summary that was done of this book, and the summary is actually excellent. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 pages, but it is a great summary of each of the chapters, and does give a brief summary of each of the strategies. So that again is under materials, and it is the PDF Making Thinking Visible summary. I know that Bergen just said that they have a great website. Let's see, I think Bergen said that. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at, oh, so many good things. You guys, it's so fun when everybody is interacting. Bergen said the authors have a good website that has examples of the thinking routines in the book. And I think I saw here that Stephanie said she's going to be starting a discussion in the ACES networking group related to this topic. So check it out. I have a feeling that many of us are going to be bringing this up. And I do see one suggestion for webinars in addition to CCRS, how to teach students higher order thinking skills specific to answering the type of test questions on the CASAS goals test. Okay, thank you. We like any of those suggestions. And if we don't do it in a webinar, we definitely put that with other suggestions, and we're always considering what sessions we're going to offer at different PD events. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you have additional ideas, feel free to email me or Kristine or Lindsey those. Yeah,
Patsy's going to close us up.
Yeah, any additional questions? We're not sure what this young man has to do with questions, but we like the picture, so we can put it up there. Does anyone have anything they want to clarify before we close? We'll just give you a moment here. Feel free to raise your hand as well. Otherwise, we have a Halloween-themed slide at the back end. I'll let someone put that up. So again, here's Kristine's email. If you have additional questions or ideas for a future webinar, we hope if you are celebrating Halloween, you have a safe one and enjoy all the festivities. What a great topic this was. It sounds like there was a lot of overlap with ELA and math, lots of ideas across the board, regardless of what level your students are at and what content you're teaching. There are lots of good things happening via Atlas. Be sure to keep checking your Tuesday newsletter for upcoming events and also those stellar PD articles that come through the newsletter. The website has our events calendar as well as further information on the webinars and cohorts that we described today. And we look forward to seeing you at another Atlas event soon. Happy Halloween, everybody. We'll stick around for a couple minutes, but we'll stop recording now. Let us know how we can help.